Hey everyone, this is The Dialogue, and today I'm looking at the ex-Illuminati banker who exposes the elite in this English translation. Now, his name is Ronald Bernard, and he is Dutch. So he was a banker and a trader. He's right in the business management, asset management of banks, and he got involved with the elite. So he started off pretty innocent by the sounds of it, and now he's talking about how he got involved in the sort of dark areas of banking. So let's have a look at his body language.
Those three aspects together formed the interested package I said yes to. He said, "All right, you can take my place here, I'll train you, introduce you into the network. But in exchange, I want 10% of your annual earnings."
So he's talking about an insider saying he wants 10% of his annual earnings. So if you look at his face, he does have crinkled eyes on the sides. So it's a genuine smile. And it's not meaning that this is duping delight. What it is he is trying to be affable to the person who's interviewing him.
So he basically sold me his spot in the financial world and asked a 10% commission, which I paid him. I said, yes, fine with me. Then he replied, "There is one thing you need to know. If you can't put your conscience in the proverbial freezer, and I don't mean on minus 18 degrees.
Okay, if you looked at his eyebrows, they went up. And when your eyebrows go up, they're really trying to hone home what they're saying. So it's not a deception mannerism or micro-expression. It's just, I want you to understand what I'm saying. And so he's smiling, good eye contact. So at the moment, it seems pretty congruent.
But on minus 100 degrees, then don't get involved in this." That was the message. You want a lot of money, you can obtain that, I can help you, but it comes at a great cost. Because you cannot do this with a clear conscience. Well, I laughed.
Okay, interesting. So he did nod his head most of the way through that. Yeah, you cannot do this with a clear conscience. There was a bit of a shoulder swipe, which suggests that his subconscious is not comfortable with what was said just then.
At that, I was young and naive.
So putting your conscience in the freezer was fitting in as a starting point?
I was partially already used to doing that out of self-preservation.
Pretty congruent. There's nothing that's suggesting that he's lying or deceitful or not being very candid.
So to put my conscience in the freezer was not an impossible task to me.
So it became a survival mechanism to you?
Yes. And my view of humanity and the world around me wasn't exactly positive either. I only thought of myself that the way I grew up to be out of self-preservation, and I got into that deal.
And when he was talking about that deal, his eyes were they were blinking, and that's when there's a bit of stress that is popping up. It doesn't necessarily mean to say he's deceitful, but it means that he's under a little bit of stress.
Which meant that slowly I build up a customer base. And as I
shrugged his shoulders, which means, customer base could be anyone.
Improved my skills within the network, I got deeper into the financial world.
Nodding of head.
And then it turns out the world is really small, and you keep noticing that. Even
the shoulder shrug.
You are talking about worldwide cash flows, so not the Netherlands in particular where you started working?
The Netherlands do play a distinct part in this story, but the world does not revolve around.
Okay, so there's a lot of steepling going on and a lot of explanation via hand. So that's the way he rolls, and he explains using his hand, which actually adds to your charisma, believe it or not, or adds to a person understanding what you're saying more so than when they don't use their hands.
But on the higher levels, it is just a game and they are all working together. However, they do have to stick to the rules and regulations they themselves have created to keep the rest of society suppressed and make sure that it will not be too crowded at the top. So you have to play by your own rules. So what is going on there?
Okay, there doesn't seem to be a lot at all of deception mannerisms here. He's very descriptive and still smiling. He's got a little bit of contempt in his face.
Is to make sure that nobody can trace you, apart from the elite themselves. Nobody in lower ranks can find out what really happened.
Compartmentalized, that's how we call it.
Yes.
Right there, poked his tongue, which can indicate disgust. So it's disgust for, I guess, the Illuminati or the higher elite, or maybe himself being involved in that.
Everyone knows only his own little piece. Only the elite knows what is happening.
Yes, but because we were doing the dirty work, we had to know a lot. Because we couldn't afford to make any mistakes.
Really good eye contact.
How high in the pyramid did you get? Were you close to the top of the pyramid?
Well, we were communicating with them. My ego would have loved it when I got to this position of belonging to the top itself. Nowadays we still talk about 8,000 to 8,500 people in the world who run the entire world. It would have been amazing to get into such a position back then.
Okay, so he's pretty relaxed with what he's saying, to the point with his fingers pointing. He's to the point and he's telling you exactly what happened.
All right, but if we say the top knows 100%, can you estimate how much you knew and understood of what happened?
In my work, I had to know 100% of what was going on. There was no other way, because of the interest.
See his hand? So he's not completely open with his hand. So it's probably indicating of the fact that he did know everything, but he didn't share that with everyone else. And he's just demonstrating that with his hands.
Of the people involved were huge, especially for the top. If I wouldn't know all the details, I would end up making mistakes.
Oh, did you have nerves of steel?
Yes, it worked just fine.
The freezer worked very well for you.
And he's got his big smile, which is indicative of, it is actually a form of duping delight, as he's delighted at the fact that he was pretty good at that.
Yes, I played at the highest level for about 5 years.
So there's no head shakings, indicating that he's fibbing.
And then it was totally over, out and done with.
So his hands are open, they're out. So it means he's actually being as honest as he can be. He's being pretty congruent.
And managing assets well, so it could grow to rate of return, leading to reinvestments with the money. The level I played at in those 5 years, and that didn't happen overnight, you need to earn your place. I am skilled at connecting the dots, information in order to achieve a full picture of all the things involved that need to be taken into account within the playing field. Which is a very detailed process. You stand out, multinationals, you have to deal with secret services, and what they now call terrorist organizations.
Interesting. So he's looking down to think. When you look down like that, he is in his thinking mode.
You get all of the groups that are involved with the big money as clients. Then you start seeing the connections. So, they might be compartmentalized as you just mentioned, regarding knowledge. But because I am in the middle, I see how they relate to another. You see the money coming from this place, then going to that
Really congruent.
place, etc. You keep gaining information and thereby.
So do you have to serve and keep all of those groups happy, including terrorist organizations? You were trying to keep...
The tongue roll is a sense of anxiety about what he was involved with. It's his own anxiety coming through his mouth and with his tongue going into his mouth like that.
Keep everybody happy?
Yes,
My God.
that was my job.
Keeping all the balls in the air.
Okay, so he's nodding his head. He's not shaking it, and there's nothing else. Not touching his face, not smoothing his hair. He's not soothing himself. So that would indicate deception. There's nothing going on. He's pretty congruent.
Yes, indeed. So one of the things that I found out.
Right there. So he does a lot of hand steepling. You'll see that his hands come together in a pyramid kind of form. That means he's highly confident about what he's saying. Highly, because it's very high. If it's lower, he's less confident, but he's very confident with what he's saying.
I did not know that before, but now I do. Is about secret services. You think they are there to serve and protect a people, country, etc., but they actually turn out to be the criminal organizations, to be more precise. The system is heavily so. Are talking about financing wars, creating wars, so basically creating a lot of misery in this world. So, lots of conflict.
Lots of conflict, open hands, raised eyebrows before, wants you to understand him.
And then I think to myself, if only people knew what the world is really like. Secret services will stop at nothing. Nothing. But they also have their flows of money, because if they are trading in drugs or weapons or, for that matter, people, all that money has to go somewhere. Everything has to be financed.
You say it, but you could confirm they are doing this?
All of them. All of them. So the entire world as we think we know it is just an illusion we believe in, which is something you find out in this line of work and where it all went wrong for me, to put it that way.
Right. You mean, finally that is?
In hindsight, yes, it was for the best, but my freezer started to malfunction. There were things happening. For example, I went to a different trade market and one of my colleagues there said, "Ronald, you remember that case with the Italian lira? I sometimes mention that during talks as well. Do you remember those deals, in which we did massive dumping of the lira, which reduced the value of the currency, which caused a company in Italy to be hit in such a way, they went bankrupt."
Big head nod there, opening of the eyes, and even it's a critical eyebrow raise there.
And you hear at the exchange, "You remember that successful deal with the lira?" Yes. And then they say, "Did you know that the owner committed suicide and left a family behind?"
Right there. Okay, so you saw his chin sort of furrow. That's a sense of sadness coming in here. Although his mouth isn't turned down, there was a sense of sadness coming in. He's talking about suicide.
And then you hear at the exchange, "You remember that successful deal with the lira?" Yes. And then they say, "Did you know that the owner committed suicide and left a family behind?"
Right there. Sadness.
Things like that.
Again.
And back then we laughed at it. Altogether, all of us. We looked down.
So that's interesting. So he was being honest. He laughed at that back then, and there was a mouth, his tongue did come through, which indicates that he felt disgust. Maybe it was disgust for himself and his colleagues laughing at that.
On people, mocked them. It was just a product, waste. Everything was worthless trash. Nature, the planet, everything could burn and break.
Just useless parasites.
Just as
Right
long
there.
as...
So he's really honing down with his fingertips. When you're doing that, you're putting it right there and you're saying, this is exactly what happened. Really good eye contact. He's not fudging anything, and he's not backing away from anything either.
We met our goals. As long as we were growing, many of my colleagues ended up drinking or using drugs. Not me. Maybe I should have.
Or not.
No, in hindsight, it was for the best and I'm happy to still be alive. However, all those horrible things started to eat at me.
Can you give an example?
Interesting. So he had a contempt for himself there.
Because I can sense a lot of terrible things happen to you.
Again, disgust for himself, tongue through the mouth.
Yes, it is.
And also he pressed his lips together just then, which means there's some information he's keeping to himself.
Difficult for me to talk about.
Yeah,
I can feel that, but only whatever you wish to share is all right.
Yes, I only talk about things I want to tell. But it does evoke lots of emotions, and with my conscience not being in the freezer, it touches me deeply.
Yes,
And you can see in his eyes that these are not dead eyes. These eyes are alive. And he got involved in something where he let his conscience go. That's why he's holding his eye contact. There's a feeling that he wants to come clean.
feel the same way. All right.
Well, still hiding information though.
Can you tell me the worst thing that has happened that caused the tipping point in your situation?
Well, that was
Deep breath, because here it comes. I haven't seen the whole of this video, but I know something's coming up. Deep breath.
the beginning of the end. You get so deep into these circles.
Shrugging shoulders. So he's unsure of himself. Shrugging shoulders often means you're not sure about what you're going to say.
You sign a lifetime contract, not with blood or anything, to never disclose names of companies, organizations or people. I think that is why I am still alive. You have to stick to it. If we are talking about the worst things that I have experienced, I just told you about things that made the freezer glitch. My conscience started to show itself. Let's put it this way. I was training to become a psychopath and I failed. I did not complete the training and didn't become a psychopath. My conscience came back, and the most difficult part for me was, because I had such a great status there, I was a success. I was trusted with the people playing at this level. To put it carefully, most of these people followed not very mainstream religion. So, you have Catholics, Protestants, all sorts of religions. These people, most of them, were Luciferians. And then you can say, religion is a fairy tale, God doesn't exist, none of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality. And they served something immaterial.
Interesting. So he looks up into the sky to indicate religion or a being, and he's opening himself up.
They called Lucifer. And I
Raised eyebrows to express that.
also was in contact with those circles, only I laughed at it because to me they were just clients. So, I went to places called churches of Satan.
He did. He raised his eyebrows, letting you know he went there.
So now we are talking about Satanism.
Yes. So, I visited these churches, just as a visitor, dropped by, and then they were doing their holy mass with naked woman and liquor and stuff. And it just amused me. I didn't believe in any of this stuff, and was far from convinced if any of this was real.
Okay, shrugging of shoulders. It's congruent with what he's saying.
Was just a spectacle to you.
Yes, in my opinion, the darkness and evil is within the people themselves. I didn't make the connection yet. So I was a guest in those circles, and it amused me greatly to see all those named women and the other things as the good life. But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices.
Okay, this is getting pretty heavy here.
Abroad.
Disgust. Right there. Head nodding. Oh, sadness and absolute shock. Bewilderment. See that furrowing of the chin? That's emotion, huge emotion. It's I can't believe it. Not only bewilderment, but shock.
That was the breaking point.
Right there. Jaw together. He's feeling really tense at the moment. Eyelids going. He's hiding information or hiding what he really saw.
Children.
Children.
You were asked to do that?
Yes. And I couldn't do that.
Okay, we've got some tears in the eyes. This is pretty heavy stuff, guys. This is a very long video, so I'm going to end it here, and I'll leave the link in the description below because there's another third to go. It's pretty scary stuff if this is real. He seems to be pretty congruent with most of what he's saying. Doesn't mean to say he's telling the absolute truth. You have to be inside his head to really know the truth. And because there's so much heavy information here, I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions and do your own research with this guy. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe and ding my bell.